Testing revolution is one way to put it. I think it's also a testing evolution, is what we've seen. So thanks everyone for joining, and try to keep this as informative as possible. Just a little bit about Provar. We've been in the leader in Salesforce testing since 2014. We were incubated out of a platinum Salesforce consulting partner in the UK by the name of Make Positive. And our leadership actually came out of QA and test automation, as well as most of our team. Again, our team was built by folks that have been deeply ingrained in the Salesforce ecosystem. We have offices in Nashville, Tennessee. Our headquarters is UK. We have a great team in India as well, and about 100 employees, and a growing number of worldwide partners as well. So kind of as a start, and I think we all somewhat see this, right? So enterprise applications are certainly, like Salesforce, have certainly become much more mainstream and key. I think in an IDC report, I think about this time last year, they were talking about how the Salesforce economy is going to be something like $1.2 trillion by the year 2014. So that, you know, we're a year down the track, and what that basically means, for every $1 spent on Salesforce licensing, there'll be $4 spent on services development and other pieces that relate to that ecosystem. So it certainly has moved up the category. And one of the things they found is actually, you know, software, or Salesforce specifically, as companies are developing and innovating at a speed never seen before. And almost 60% of companies are really deploying new updates, in some cases on a daily basis. And unfortunately, testing is one of those things that really has taken a back seat. And unfortunately, for many folks, it really has delayed the delivery of software, and also impacts things such as quality and customer disruption and user disruption. And finally, it's one of those areas that we find really has a significant opportunity for improvement. And I'm going to talk a little bit further about that as we go through the slides. I think we've all seen this. This is a pretty standard circle around the DevOps life cycle. This came from Vala, the chief digital evangelist for Salesforce. And you'll notice kind of the typical analyze, build, deliver, operate thing of that DevOps life cycle. And one of the things, if you'll notice, we've taken a little bit of leave and made the testing circle a little bit bigger. And it's great to be presenting with CodeScan as well. And I think many folks take a look at testing really from a unit testing and code testing, which obviously CodeScan leads the way on. And also you have the tools native to Salesforce for Apex class testing. So, you get to 70% and you're good enough to deploy kind of a model. Well, I think UI testing and functional testing and really regression testing has somewhat taken a back seat, simply because the software development lifecycle, specifically as Salesforce has emerged, has somewhat been maturing as we go. So this piece here, we would argue that companies that haven't really adopted a consistent testing strategy, and really specifically around regression testing, it really becomes a bottleneck for success. And I talk to customers on a regular basis that tell me their regression testing cycles can take anywhere from 2 to 3 days, 1 to 2 weeks, and in some cases monthly. And when I hear that, it just indicates to me that this whole process kind of comes to a screeching halt. And it really isn't very agile. And so one of the areas that we truly have focused on is really how do we really be great in this one spot. The other piece you'll notice throughout the life cycle here is these little gear icons, is our testing also needs to interact kind of through the cycle, both in the early user story development, in the actual development cycle. How do you start engaging developers, that whole shift left concept. Getting developers involved earlier on as you're packaging your deployments, your documentation, and then even into things such as loading of data, your test data, and running those scripts, the deployment, and then the monitoring and keeping up with compliance systems, especially if you're in regulated industries. So again, testing, we believe, really kind of is a key break point or key linchpin to driving success with in the DevOps lifecycle. Now, where does that fit? So with Provar, we've tended to take the approach of with the whole CI/CD pipeline models of saying, look, no application is an island, enterprises of all sizes, and we have over half of our customers are, enterprise class customers, and we have Fortune 100, Fortune 50 companies, as well as companies that have 100 employees or less. And they'll see a variety of tools, whether it be, Bitbucket or Git for version control, Jenkins is an example for release management. Some of the new solutions, such as Salesforce DX, we're announcing some new functionality where we have a plugin for Salesforce DX, and a variety of others. So we try to play nicely with all those other applications, as well as the design, right? So you've got to be able to look at, hey, is your testing going to work with the tools you have? Things such as Zero for creating your user stories, as well as environments that you may choose to go run those, and then also the reporting. Slack is a great example. Obviously, a lot of announcement of that last week with Salesforce making that purchase. So how can you make it more open-ended so that it interacts with the solutions that are out there? In Provar, we've tried to take an approach where we, play nice in the ecosystem so you can deal with the best of breed tools. As far as with Flosum, we do have the ability to, approve an integration. You can link directly with Flosum to, update those Provar tests. You can configure our process builder to, to be able to call test and use those defined criteria. And also, again, having the ability to work together with your release management tools is really key, especially with leaders in the Salesforce space, such as Flosum. What is the tool? So what's the real problem we're trying to address? As we all know, Salesforce has its own unique challenges, especially with keeping tests updated. And what we typically find is customers or prospects fall into two categories. Half of the world are using tools such as Selenium framework or tools that are built on top of Selenium, which is a great solution, but they're not purpose built for Salesforce, right? So that becomes a challenge. And then the other piece is they're not really intuitive. They typically require a lot of development and skilled resources to be able to not only build and update tests, but also maintain them. And finally, you need help when you need help, right? How do I upskill my resources where, 50% of the world is using test automation tools. The other 50% of the world is not really doing test automation. And they're using manual testing, or they might just be doing UAT testing. And that's really kind of the default we see. And so again, how do we upskill and how do we raise the tide of knowledge about making testing, more critical to the journey around, not only around DevOps, but quality and the performance of Salesforce. And so what we've taken the approach is saying, look, we really wanted to be the best at testing Salesforce. And so we've embedded that knowledge into our product, making it very intuitive to be able to work closely. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of what makes that differentiation. The other piece we took is building a test should be as easy as the application under test. And so with Salesforce, I think we all recognize the ability that you need to have declarative tools, actual click to configure tools. How do I upskill people that maybe have not come from a pure play development or QA background and be able to enable them to do testing as well? And then again, I need to be able to be supported when something doesn't work or I can't figure it out. How do I call? So those are kind of the three tenets we've really tried to focus on. And what we did too, so from a product perspective, and I'm not going to do this justice. We're happy to give a more full featured demo, but what I'm showing here is this is our core flagship product called Test Builder. And you're literally building an application inside of a Chrome extension. So we build our inside of our platform. We are an on-premise Eclipse-based application, desktop application that runs on Windows or Mac. And then you open up this Chrome extension. And literally, you're making a connection into Salesforce. And as easy as click and add steps to a test case and then add and do. So you're literally building tests live. And can do things such as validating and asserting values, also understanding where you are on the page. Again, this comes from our deep connection with Salesforce. But once you've built the tests and these steps, you basically then can run those autonomously. So the build, again, that true click to configure, how do you have a very low code? But also then, the other piece is around the maintenance, because, it would be great if you deployed Salesforce it never changed, but we all know that's not true, right? So how do I update it? How do I handle when I move things around the pages? How do I handle different login credentials and so forth? And those are all key pieces to the intuitiveness of the testing. And so that's an area, just as an example of a preview of some of the things we do around that. Certainly a much more powerful tool. So kind of as I kind of start wrapping up here, ultimately we feel like you just need tests that just work, right? So regardless of what solution you're looking at, we'd love to participate with you. Again, how do you have things that just work? And not only with core CRM, but Sales Cloud, Health Cloud, the various Force.com applications that you put on, those are key. And largely the way we do that is we take a metadata-driven approach. So we connect directly to the metadata layer of your orgs, multiple orgs, because you're going to typically have multiple sandboxes, maybe scratch orgs, also production. And so, again, they just need to connect and understand explicitly what the objects are and what the fields are. Release net readiness is probably the second thing beyond ease of use that we get. Everyone on the call, if you're working with Salesforce, you're going to deal with the 3-time annual releases. And to be able to take advantage of that new innovation, you need to be able to know that you can test it, work with it as soon as it's available. And the way we do that is we really try to stay extremely closely tied to Salesforce. In fact, we're the only ISV vendor that's actually working with Salesforce in advance of the 3 times annual releases. So we recently had in September, winter 21, coming out in January, will be spring 21. We've been working with Salesforce along this journey leading up to that. So we'll launch our next release of our product prior to general availability of spring 21 coming out in January. So you can start testing against the newest feature functionality. And that inside track really helps us, raise the tide of testing, meaning that we do webinars as well that talk about, hey, here are the key features coming out in Salesforce. And this is what you should be aware of as these new features and what the impact is on testing. And finally, it's having a set of tools that not only lets you do kind of the recording of the steps in the browser, but also lets you do things directly against the API. So again, a full feature-rich set of solution that lets you work the way you need to and test the things that make the most sense. Even testing things outside of Salesforce, whether it be SOAP or REST endpoints or other web-based applications, giving you those tools. So those are kind of the key bullet points I think you should look at in any testing solution. The other piece I would call out too is beyond being declarative tools, which I think we all recognize, is you also need to be able to have a set of solution that lets you work the way you need to. And so there are things that you may need to do more customized scripting. However, we don't take you down that track first. We give the ability for you to pull the covers back from the click to configure and get into the code and actually make it easier for you to help define that. So again, certainly declarative click to configure out of the gate, but also giving you the robustness underneath that. And things such as also thinking about, hey, do I have expressions and functions pre-built in the process, into the design process, that can help even a non-developer tester be able to write very robust tests. So a lot of those things are all built in. We are working also on building out more of a marketplace with some code examples, and I think you'll find a lot more coming that both from Provar and also our partners. So kind of just to start wrapping up here, we look at the piece that I think somewhat gets lost with us is that we absolutely take a Salesforce first approach and want to be and are the #1 testing solution for Salesforce. However, Salesforce is not an island. And so being able to do end-to-end testing, and that's that E2E comment. And so there's data feeding into Salesforce that you need to validate is correct. You have things leaving Salesforce, going to things such as ERP or other operational systems. And that data is coming back into Salesforce. So you need to be able to check both data vertically that touches Salesforce, as well as being to test other applications independent of Salesforce. And so if you look at, as an example, with Splunk, one of our great customers, they actually did a great session at the last live Dreamforce, and hopefully we'll all get to go back to those again. They actually had a great use case going from CRM, Sales Cloud, CPQ into NetSuite and back to Salesforce. And so all were able to manage that piece. A lot of it also, how do you test APIs? And then even email testing. And this can go beyond just looking at, the typical email, web to lead or web to case functionality. How can you interact and share results with testing teams, compliance teams as well? How do you handle those? Or if you're getting emails in, how do you check things? Hey, I need to be sure I'm uploading these documents or PDFs. So again, that Salesforce and beyond, that's a key area I think you need to look at for any solutions that you might be looking at. Again, we'll have this deck sent out, just a couple of results of what kind of effort and what kind of reduction in savings. I like to say you end up, if you can automate, you can actually be better than free. Because both these clients, both Splunk and Alm brands out of the Nordics, these were their results that they reported. And this is pretty standard. And this is typically coming from a manual perspective. So not only running tests faster, but that end to end. And the one that really stands out to me is this hot fixes in production. Imagine everyone's been in this case, right, of where you've deployed something and then you get the aha moment of, oh, gee, we didn't know that was in there and we have to drop what we're doing. Or, worst case scenario, we've disrupted our users from doing their job, or even worse, the worst, that's not a great word. The challenge of you've actually disrupted your business. You've caused a customer not to get service or be able to deliver. And so with what they showed was, they're running on an average somewhere between 12 and a high of 21 per quarter, where the first 2 quarters using Provar, they dropped that average to 5 per quarter. So that's a pretty significant number. So not just making the tester's life easier or reducing the time it takes to run regressions, but also how do you add quality and document quality for your business. And those are really kind of the key pieces. So finally, again, we do a couple of things when we do partner. We include consulting. Our onboarding time in reality, in some cases, is hours and days and weeks. But we give you a person. It does not require a massive implementation. We've got a great set of partners. We're adding partners on a regular basis that can help build this. But this tool absolutely can be used and monitored. And I'd point you to the G2 Crowd results. Again, our team is your team, again, having great support, being there to help you get going and really enabling your team. And how do you go manage, optimize your investment? We just launched this week, the University of Provar. So all of our content and our certification is online. So a lot of that company, but I think you'll see, again, that ease of use, being able to be effective really in days and weeks is where we try to drive and really be able to up your game when it comes to Salesforce testing. And finally, another great comment from, another great customer of ours here at Whole Foods. And really that's it. We appreciate the opportunity to chat and love to support you and help you with information going forward. But Haley, that's about it.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for the great presentation. That was informative. I'm going to jump right into a couple questions that we got in the Q&A. And if anyone has any more questions, you can continue putting them in the Q&A right now while we speak. The first question is, how hard is it for non-QA resources to learn Provar?
Great question. I think, again, if you point back to the G2 Crowd's reviews that we have, it's actually very simple. My role coming into this company, I actually had to learn Provar before to get the job. And I found I was able to go through the learning guide and be able to write tests literally within a few hours of going through the execution guides. About half the companies that come to us, they typically self-implement and get going. And then certainly enabling kind of the traditional, let's say, Salesforce admin, someone who's a Salesforce developer. A lot of good resources. Again, we provide that training, and I think it's relatively straightforward, and we can document that.
Okay, awesome. Next question is, does Provar support test data management?
Yes, we do. We have the ability to, as part of our platform, you can import data directly from data sources, whether it be CSV file, even directly from a Excel spreadsheet workbook as an example, and let's say you have multiple worksheets, you can connect to databases, an example, and other formats like JSON and so forth, to where you can actually set up a test script or test use case that will load your test data. And then more importantly, after you've run through all those tests, you can have it to where it will extract that data and do the cleanup for you. So you're not, getting that bloat. But yes, absolutely can help automate that process as well.
All right, awesome. And we had one actually just come in that is, what is the difference and how is Provar better than TestRail and Ranorex?
Great question. I think that those are great products. I think what you'll find is they're very broad-based testing applications, and I would somewhat say they fall into the same category as what you find with Selenium and the tools that are built on Selenium. They're not purpose-built for Salesforce, so you can do a lot of the things. You can do similar things, just like we can test non-Salesforce applications. However, when you're dealing with Salesforce and the uniqueness of Salesforce, both from a metadata perspective and also things such as Lightning Web Components, it's really critical to be able to interact with Salesforce the way Salesforce is structured. And a lot of those solutions, what we typically find is, again, not being purpose-built. They test Salesforce also, where we test Salesforce first. And so that would probably be the biggest differentiation. And again, I'd point you also back to look at what some of the reviews say about, from how we work and the product. But again, if Salesforce is core to your business, which we typically find in this use case, I like to say use the tools, the right tool for the job. And Salesforce is a big enough of an investment for most companies that, having very specific Salesforce tools is usually pretty easy to make. Great question, though. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, there's a lot of great questions here. Another one is, what business users is Provar designed for? This person sees that you had recommendations from technical architects. What he's wondering, do you need to have a coding background? Seems every obstacle that they encounter needs a developer to correct.
Well, the obstacles you may need developers to fix them, so no doubt. I think certainly we took the approach of being a very robust tool to be focused at the tester and QA automation engineer. However, with the purpose built of trying to be declarative and click to configure and click to fix, moving left into the business analyst, the admin, maybe a traditional Salesforce developer is absolutely a market and absolutely a persona that we try to focus on. One of the things that we will do as far as an engagement cycle, we will do things such as complimentary POCs, and we do guided trials. So if you are new to the concept and maybe you're not quote or categorize yourself as a developer, yes, we absolutely have customers, and many of our clients fall into that category, and we're here to help you on that journey to upskill. But there is a level of technology pieces that you may need a developer to go make changes in Salesforce to repair, and that's part of the challenge too. We try to find is there's a lot of people have done things in Salesforce before it ever gets to the stage where they're going to do test automation. And so sometimes finding all those subtle nuances deep in the legacy applications is challenging for anybody, whether you're a skilled developer or not.
Okay. And I think this is going to be our last question. We do have some more, but we're going to close it out after this one. How difficult is it to integrate with Jenkins? And do you have a solution when Salesforce updates? What will happen to the click to configure tests?
Great question. So we absolutely work with Jenkins. In fact, it's probably the most widely used. So we have our execution piece of our product. So there's two components. One is the design environment where you design and build inside of the Eclipse interface and inside of the Chrome extension. We then have an execution command line interface that interacts where you would typically install that with your Jenkins service or Bitbucket or any of the other release management tools. So we have native support for connecting to Jenkins, and we will support you through our support mechanism of helping getting that set up. So absolutely, it's all of those testing files are in a XML format for really executing, with via Ant or other methods. The second half of the question was, and I rambled on, what was the second half of the question other than Jenkins?
That was what is going to happen to click to configure tests? They're wondering if you have a solution for when Salesforce updates.
Yes, so absolutely. This goes back to the release management where we work with Salesforce. So if you're using the metadata, this is the approach that we take. So if your metadata isn't changing and you're not adding new fields and stuff, it's gonna explicitly recognize where those are on the page. As they add new functionality, as far as things like dynamic pages and so forth, yes, you have to use a page locator model, and we're happy to go through and show you what that looks like. But the locators we use are probably more intuitive and understand the Salesforce page layout, such that if you're moving one component from one side of the page to another, we're gonna recognize that. And so that's kind of that area about maintenance and management. And then obviously we're gonna support the most current version. So prior to spring 21 coming out, we'll be releasing Provar 2.3, and that will support everything that's coming out in the release coming out in January. So everything that we can test, we've been pre-testing with Salesforce typically a month or two in advance.